Hello everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Big Ideas. Today we have with us Dr. Anish Andheria, President and CEO of Wildlife Conservation Trust, a non-profit organization working towards preservation of natural ecosystem and wildlife. Hello Anish.
Hi Pavithra. Thanks for having me.
So Anish, what is the big idea that you want to discuss today?
Well, in the field of conservation, there are many big ideas that we need to implement. This particular one is a very pressing one, but to get there, I want to set the context first. So India is 35 lakh square kilometers. It's a big country. And it is rich in biodiversity. So most people feel, and we keep hearing about tigers, we keep hearing about leopards next to a city, we know of elephants, we know of so many different species, and people do see them around townships as well. So we are complacent. We feel that India is doing well. However, as I said, to put things in context, we have to understand that despite all this talk about wildlife and associating India with snakes and peacocks and tigers, actually we don't have enough left now. We are 1.4 billion people and we have only 5% of our country under the protected area network, which means only 5% of India is protected either as national park or sanctuary. We have two other PAs, which is conservation reserve and community reserve. So between these four, we are only talking about 5% of India. People also are aware about tiger reserves and they feel that India has many tiger reserves, and of course India has 54 tiger reserves. But if you add all the area of these tiger reserves, it is 2.3% of India. And the core, the tiger reserve is divided into core and buffer. The core is generally either a national park or a sanctuary. And so when I say India has 5% protected area, the tiger reserve core is a subset of that. So it's not 5% plus 2.3. So that 5% also has tiger reserves in it. And that's not all. If say there is about, I would say 75,000 square kilometers is under Project Tiger. Of that, 50% is core, 50% is buffer. And in that 50% of buffer, we are looking at 3 million people. 3 million people, as we talk, live inside India's tiger reserves. 100 million people are dependent for their daily subsistence on these tiger reserves because they live along the periphery and they depend on these natural resources that is provided to them by these tiger reserves on a daily basis. Up to 40% of the subsistence, up to 40% comes from just that 2.3% of tiger reserve land. 300 million people are dependent on protected areas of India, which is, when I say 5% of India, 300 million people on a daily basis are dependent on some kind of subsistence from this. Now, when you have such small area under protection, it has its consequences. We have to understand that Project Tiger, which I am coming to again and again, but there is a reason why I am using that word. Tiger is synonymous with water. So when we talk of tigers, we are actually talking about the hydrological balance of the country. Why tiger? Because tiger is found in very many different types of habitat. So they are not just like, for instance, the lion. The lion is found in dry, arid areas of Gujarat. It's not found anywhere else. Okay. If you look at the elephant is also not found in the dry areas. But the tiger is found beyond Mussoorie up in the Himalayas, Pithoragarh also. It is found even in Sikkim. It is found in mangrove belts of Sundarbans, which is all marshland. It is found in Rajasthan, which is very dry. It is found in the Western Ghats, which is pretty much evergreen forests, where it rains. In some of these areas, it rains for almost 150 to 200 days in a year. And it is found in the Deccan Plateau, plus the Shivaliks. So tiger represents very many different habitats. And so Project Tiger was launched as tiger represented all these different habitat types to secure the river systems of India, which many people don't know. Because we need a currency to measure the success of a program. So tiger was that currency. India has decided that the best way to develop is to build infrastructure. Now, infrastructure largely in terms of road, railway, canal system, because we want to irrigate as much land as we can, and power lines. Coal power, which we are very good at generating, is reaching most cities and towns, but it's still not reaching the remotest part. Hybrid, now solar has really come in. India has done excellently when it comes to solar energy, but eventually that energy also has to be transported. So you need power lines. So the 4 different types of linear infrastructure the government has decided have to be developed at a very fast pace if we want to meet most of our SDG goals. Which means the road network is going to grow up exponentially. Railways will expand. New tracks will be laid, but single tracks will become double. There could be 4 tracks going. Irrigation is a very big limitation. So you will have more canal systems and you will have power lines. In the past, it used to move out from these areas where coal was mined and then cracking was happening. Now you will have power lines moving out of the desert because there the solar power is generated. And so you will have power lines everywhere. So now just start adding layers. First, as I said, protected areas, we have less than what we need. We need 33%. We really have 5%. 600 rivers originate or are fed by forests. All these forests, there are millions of people who are dependent on them even today directly, which means for fuel wood, to cook food, they have to go and collect wood. They don't do it because they want to destroy the forest or ecosystem. They have to because they have to feed their children. So that has degraded our forest over the last 100 years. So if you were to look at a GIS image, remote sense image from 1900, there wasn't any satellite at that point. So we don't have those images. We have since 1970. So we have last 55 years of data. All our ecosystems where people live in have got degraded. There are very, very few areas, and I would say not even 5%, where the forests have done better. So we know that trend. It is going down because there is huge amount of dependence. Millions of people are dependent. So that layer. Villages are expanding because the life expectancy has gone up. Medicine has not reached everybody, but it has still reached, and your life expectancy has gone up. So more people, land is divided now. Land holdings have become smaller, and new houses have popped up. Their dependence on sand, on other natural resources to build houses. So that is happening at one level. Now, so biodiversity loss is an outcome of all this. When you degrade a natural ecosystem, it will impact biodiversity. When you fragment a natural ecosystem, which means a good quality forest, if you build a road right through the center, soon you will see that alien species will move in, which means there'll be seeds going along the cars, people's shoes, and some species which are alien to this country, which are already introduced in cities, will now find its way into the forests. Plus, there'll be a petrol pump somewhere. There'll be a chai wala somewhere. From there, there will be businesses like venison, which means deer meat and all that will be served. Trucks will still keep going. cigarettes will be thrown, forest will catch fire. All across this planet, if you were to plot how roads have destroyed the ecosystems, it's available. JS images for the last 54 years, you can just do a time lapse and you will see how Amazon has got destroyed because some pulp industry came up somewhere and a big road came through the forest, and now it is absolutely destroyed because a lot of people have started usurping land illegally, encroachments and all that have started coming, which means these linear infrastructures, which are considered as the most important aspect for developing nation like India, are going to bring these things along.
Mm.
And we already know that we are in a bad situation when it comes to whatever is existing today. On top of it, you're going to build roads. Today, as I speak, India is building 22 to 23 kilometers of 6-lane and 4-lane road every single day. The plan is to increase that to up to 44 kilometers per day. More than 50% of all roads that are going to exist by 2040 are not yet built. Similarly, railways are expanding because I am on several state level committees and I get a lot of these proposals that are actually presented to the committee to see whether they are environmentally viable or not. And you keep seeing this every single day. New canal systems coming, 100-meter wide canals coming, which are sometimes wider than the width of the river that is feeding that canal. But they are being built. Power lines, as I told you, solar is also going to go from wind energy. So all these now, it's not just from those places where you could get coal. Now it's going to come from areas like Ladakh, where the government thinks that it is very good in terms of the solar potential is so good that you could build solar plants. So then you will have power lines coming out of there. So all that is going to go up many folds. And so the big idea that now I can come to is that if we are not going to be able to increase the quality of ecosystems that we have, and that the track record of the country is such that while we have been able to conserve tigers and leopards and elephants, their populations have done well in the last 20 years, but their habitats have got degraded. So the population has gone up, but the habitats have got degraded. It's counterintuitive, but that is what is true. So if you go by the trend, you know that we are not going to reverse that. Now we are going to add this tsunami of development of these various 4 different intrusions. It's going to be a death knell for the country. So you will have medical facilities reaching, but you will have 10 times more diseased people because there will be polluted waters. They will have waters which are polluted not because of the chemical industry alone, but minerals. There is arsenic, there is lead, all of it is there in our crust. It's all going to get mixed because people are increasingly going to need groundwater for survival. So we are having surface water, but because the ecosystem is going to get degraded and fragmented now because of road networks, you will have to depend on subsurface water, which means all that's there down there, and some of it is there for millions of years, is now going to get pumped out. Agriculture is being done with borewell water. So there is so much of pollution there, natural, which is bad for people. So you can imagine that on one hand, we have a plan to reach the deepest corners of a country. But on the other, that plan is actually going to be counterproductive to the lives of the poorest of the poor.
Right.
And so as a conservationist, while we talk of species, it's impossible for us to ignore what's going to happen at a much larger level. Another very important aspect about roads, India is unfortunately surrounded by a lot of other countries which are not very friendly with us. And so we have to defend our borders. And already the the Forest Conservation Act, which was a very, very powerful act where it prohibited people from converting forest into non-forest uses. It was launched in 1980. That act has been modified so that land acquisition from the forest department can be expedited.
Right.
So now committees like the State Board of Wildlife, where I sit, my organization is part of 3 or 4 state boards of wildlife. They will not have to come to us if the road they can justify is to improve defense for the nation. Which means the most vulnerable ecosystems, which are up in the Himalayas, because Himalayas is crumbly, seismically very, very active, are the places where they will build a 6-lane road along the border for security. I don't want to get into how important that is. While they do it in the name of defense, it is important that they remember that it cannot happen at the expense of biodiversity. Because in all this game, when you talk of climate change, people think that biodiversity and climate change has no connection. That climate change is largely because we are pumping out fuel or like carbon dioxide because we are burning fossil fuels. And mostly what we are pumping out, and also because the forest cover is going down. So most people think that you plant trees and you can fight climate change. But that's not true. Forest, which is biodiverse, fights climate change in a much better and efficient way than a monoculture forest. Which means plantations are not going to be solving the climate change crisis. A good, healthy ecosystem, which has different stratas. If it is a forest, then multi-layered canopy. If it is a grassland, then the kind of grasses that you have. All those, along with species of fauna, which means animals, that together creates a situation where climate change can be reversed. Which means you cannot just get the forest away and say we will replant that much forest. In some of these projects that come, the recommendations from committees is to plant 2 times more trees somewhere else. So that is a garden. We can only create gardens. We cannot create natural ecosystems. That we have to understand. And so now coming back to this linear infrastructure thing, it is impossible to say no to roads. It is impossible to say no to all these other intrusions. And therefore, it's very important that the government makes sure that the project proponents follow the guidelines for mitigation when a linear infrastructure is built. We are one of the first countries to come up with a guideline. Wildlife Institute of India has come up with a guideline. They've not yet included power lines in it, but the guidelines are there. However, if you go to, and I have seen in the last so many years, the guideline is existing for some years now. Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, West Bengal, even Uttarakhand, where roads have been built through the forest, but there has been no mitigation structure. By mitigation structure, I mean a road that is going through a corridor will have to be elevated so that animals can move from underneath. It will reduce the number of accidents. It will allow migrations of animals and a lot of other things. If a road is cut through the mountain, then you can have an overpass, which means the animals will move above the road. And animals are not just big mammals like elephants and all. There could be frogs. There could be so many other snakes, birds, which they crawl on the ground. So they are most vulnerable, and a road becomes like a barrier for them. They cannot move. So the ecosystem that they represent will get depleted if their movement stops, even at a local level. So that is extremely going to be is crucial. And so every single project which involves linear infrastructure going forward should implement mitigation on them so that development is not at cross purpose with conservation.
So how far do you think the local people, local tribes around forest play a role in, standing for this sort of causes. Plus, also, if you look at Ladakh, say, widening of the roads has increased tourism, which has in fact increased revenue and growth for the local population there as well. So this dichotomy, how do you think it will help?
Well, it's a very, very pertinent question, actually. What I was talking was from the science part of it, and also from the legal and also policy. And I absolutely understand that we need to make these voiceless communities have more voice. Because no matter where I have gone, whether it's Arunachal Pradesh, Tawang, which are very remote, very pretty areas, or you go to extremely hot areas of Greater Run of Kutch in Gujarat, or in Desert National Park, or you go to Western Ghats, some communities, just 5 families living up in the mountains. Their attachment with land, their knowledge about natural resources is impeccable. But they have no voice when it comes to policy. They will know only when the road will reach their doorstep. Yes, wherever environmentalists have actually won a battle against, say, government or any private body or organization that was destroying natural resources, it was with the help of local communities. So scientists have a role to play. But I think the best combination would be to have this cultural connection of the local community knowledge and their attachment to their ecosystem and their land, an amalgamation of that with science. Because scientists, what they can do is to we can use secondary data from all across, and we can use several other tools which they don't have access to, and we can help infer certain things.
Right.
So the best combination which is possible in India is to use the traditional knowledge and use the science that we already know. When that comes together, most of the decisions that will be guided by that will be good for the environment as well.
A final question is, we spoke about mitigation in terms of future development. But, just to think of, okay, it's all not doomed. There's something that could still be, salvaged for, say, the destruction that's already happened, or to increase this 5% further. Are there systems in place, or do you have any thoughts on that?
There is a lot of community land as yet. So India, in the field of conservation, we believed in the exclusionary principle, where the government decided that this is the area important for water. Let's use the tiger to protect it. And whoever is staying there, just get them out. So that's how it started in 1970s. But now we have taken over all the land, and that is just 5%. It's not like some big land. From where a lot of people have been moved out. So that's 5%. Beyond that, we don't have land where there is no community. There are enough and more people who will protest, and for right reasons also. So now the only way we can move from this 5% to 30%, which is a global standard and everybody knows now, is to include people in policy where communities should play a central role in securing the remaining 25% of India, what we call payment for ecosystem services, PS. So if you and I are living in Bombay and we are having water, which is for 1,000 liters, we are paying just 6 rupees. It comes as a cost. So the communities who live around the forest cannot develop because that area is now forest. It is the catchment for a lake. And so they have an opportunity cost to pay. Currently, they're paying opportunity cost silently. Eventually, some members will go into the city and work and live in a horrible condition. And quietly, some of these families are getting destroyed. You and I will not even know. So for the water that you and I drink, we are shortchanging lives of so many people. And so unless we start moving from here and we actually say that the water doesn't come from the tap, it comes from the backyard of a Korku tribal. And therefore, whatever I spend, a percentage of that, and that I don't know how much it will be, but it will be massive. Not only from the water that I directly drink, but the businesses that are dependent on water, not only for manufacturing, but for instance, any company for survival, you will need water for the people who work there, right?
Yeah.
Plus, so many of our clothes, so many jeans, all that we buy, they need water. So if all of them were to pay for the ecosystem services to those people who are paying the opportunity cost for allowing, then
That's an interesting idea.
then
Yes.
is where I think we will be able to move closer to an ideal situation. I don't know whether we will in our lifetime, because we've really come too far.
But you're also incentivizing the people to stay there and protect that, right? And you're not just chasing them out for the sake of protection.
Right.